The Carlisle Group is a global alternative asset management group. In a nutshell, they buy and sell companies using private investors' money. The story of the Carlisle Group is the story of a new kind of capitalism emerging in America. We'll start the story with this guy, Frank Carlucci. He had served in a variety of government positions, but from 1987 to 1989, he was serving as the United States Secretary of Defense for Ronald Reagan. He changed the rules on procurement at the Pentagon so that companies would be put on long-term supply contracts. He also had to cooperate with Operation 111 Wind, an investigation looking into corruption at the Pentagon with officials being bribed to secure large defense contracts. 6 days after he finished his term as Defense Secretary, he went straight to the Carlisle Group. And he advised Carlisle to take a look at a company called BDM. They had been hit hard by Operation Wind, and their share price had plummeted. Eventually, Carlisle acquired BDM for $130 million. It was a steal, because it turned out that BDM were on a long-term contract with the Pentagon. Is it possible that a person like Frank Carlucci might have known which companies were on long-term contracts and which were not? Who knows, but the Carlisle Group sold BDM in 1997 for $975 million. After Frank Carlucci came the appointment of James Baker. He had worked in politics for 18 years. He'd led presidential campaigns for President Ford, Reagan and Bush. He'd served as Chief of Staff, as Secretary of the Treasury and eventually as Secretary of State under George Herbert Walker Bush. He was and is a big deal.
People know me. I'm kind of a big deal.
But it wasn't going to just be former White House staff joining the ranks at Carlisle. Before long, the former president himself, George Bush Sr., would be giving speeches on Carlisle's behalf. He was senior advisor to Carlisle's Asia Investment Board. Neither the Carlisle Group nor the former president have been forthcoming in the way that he was remunerated for his relationship with the Carlisle Group. The former South Korean president, Park Tae-jun, was also now working for Carlisle, and he'd helped them secure nearly $1 billion in Koram Bank. So when George Bush Jr. gave the United States a pretty radical change in policy towards North Korea,
North Korea is a regime arming with missiles and weapons of mass destruction while starving its citizens. States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world by seeking weapons of mass destruction.
It did not go down well in South Korea. It caused a lot of tensions when the new policy provoked North Korea into doing what it does best, issuing threats. And threats and instability are not good for business. It was widely reported at the time that Daddy Bush, still acting in his role of Carlisle's Asia advisor, sent a strongly worded memo to his son through a former ambassador, and he argued that he should continue negotiations with North Korea. And sure enough, by July, the Secretary of State announced that talks with North Korea would resume. Perhaps it was simple fatherly advice. Nevertheless, it showed just how much influence Daddy Bush had over policy in the United States, whilst he worked for a private company profiting from decisions that government made.
Send every available ambulance, everything you got to World Trade Center now.
Before long, the Carlisle Group found themselves at the centre of a huge controversy. On September the 11th, 2001, Carlisle were holding their annual investors' dinner in Washington, D.C. In attendance was James Baker, Frank Carlucci and George Bush Sr., who left on the morning of the attacks. Also in attendance was a man by the name of Shafiq bin Laden, the half-brother of Osama bin Laden. And it was just 6 days later that George Bush Jr., the current president, would name Osama bin Laden as the prime suspect.
There's an old poster out west, as I recall, that said, "Wanted, dead or alive."
The bin Laden family maintained they had severed all contact with their estranged brother in 1991 when he lost his Saudi citizenship. But the connections between Bush Sr. and the bin Ladens through the Carlisle Group raised a few eyebrows in the United States at the time. Carlisle said that the bin Laden family had invested just $2 million. But other sources said the actual amount was much higher. The Wall Street Journal ran an article suggesting that Bush, Baker and Carlucci had all met with the bin Laden family at their headquarters in Jeddah on more than one occasion. And that in the ensuing war on terror, the bin Laden family might actually profit from the hunt for their own brother because of their investments in Carlisle. So Carlisle were forced to terminate the relationship between themselves and the bin Laden family, and it was all pretty embarrassing. But they managed their way through the PR catastrophe quite well. Cynthia McKinney, who sat in the House of Representatives at the time, said it is known that President Bush's father, through the Carlisle Group, had at the time of the attacks joint business interests with the bin Laden construction company and many defense industry holdings, the stocks of which have soared since September the 11th. It all looked pretty damning on paper. The President of the United States was the son of George Bush Sr., who was involved in the work of the Carlisle Group, which managed investments from the bin Laden family, which looked set to profit from the war which was already being spoken about.
Our war against terror is only beginning.
It wasn't made much better when the President, George Bush Jr., announced a massive increase in defense spending in 2003.
My budget nearly doubles funding for a sustained strategy.
It was made all the more potent by an earmark in the defense budget of $476 million for the development of a mobile howitzer gun called the Crusader, which was manufactured by a company called United Defense, who were owned by, you guessed it, the Carlisle Group. Carlisle's head of communications, Christopher Ullman, would later say it was one of Carlisle's best investments. Defense contractors weren't the only companies increasing their share price in the years following September the 11th. Intelligence agencies were starting to swell too. For more information about that, take a look at our video on the history of NSA wiretapping. It's there. So in 2007, George Bush, as you guys know, would announce Mike McConnell as the Director of National Intelligence from his previous role at Booz Allen Hamilton. 1 year later, right in the middle of his term as Director of National Intelligence, the Carlisle Group made their move to buy Booz Allen Hamilton. In 2008, Mike McConnell headed straight back to his former employer, now a Carlisle Group company. Needless to say, Forbes reported that from their initial $910 million investment, the Carlisle Group made a tidy $2 billion in realized and unrealized profits from the Booz Allen Hamilton deal. It's probably worth noting at this point that Mike McConnell had served as head of the National Security Agency from 1992 to 1996, and he was nominated to that position by George Bush Sr. So when you begin to investigate this kind of access capitalism, as it was called at the time, it does raise quite a few interesting questions and a whole range of paths that you might take to further an investigation. But we'll let you guys decide where we head next with this. Let us know your thoughts about all of this in a comment, and if you liked this video, please do hit the like button and share it on your Facebook page, on your Twitter account, or anywhere else you can think of. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys again next time.